What's going on, guys? Today I am going to be reviewing the Sony E-mount 50mm F1.8 OSS prime lens. Backstory about this lens. This lens was built all the way back in 2011, a long time ago. However, it's still selling very well today. It was made to take portraits, which it's amazing at. You can find tons of reviews online ranting and raving about its portrait quality, which is amazing. However, you're not going to find as many reviews that talk about its video quality, which is also pretty good. I'd like to mention that this review is about the lens that comes with optical steady shot. You can purchase a cheaper version of this lens without optical steady shot. If you don't feel like you need it, you can save a little bit of money. This is reviewing the one with optical steady shot. So the lens comes with a plastic lens hood as well as plastic front and rear lens caps. This is nothing groundbreaking, lots of lenses come with it, but not all lenses come with these, and I feel like this is something you don't really notice when it comes with it, but if it comes without these lens caps or a lens hood, it's something that you notice. So it's nice to have them, it's nice to not have to buy them separately, and it is also nice to have a lens hood that was built specifically for this lens. This 50mm F1.8 was made specifically for Sony E-mount lenses. It was made in 2011, as I said, which means it might have been made for the Sony Next series cameras, which is the series right before the Sony a6000 through 6600 came out. And so it was made for an APS-C crop sensor. It is an E-mount camera lens, however, so it can technically fit on your E-mount full-frame Sony cameras, such as the Sony a7. However, I would not recommend that because it's not built to fill a full-frame sensor, and you can kind of get around this by cropping the photos after the fact. There's also a crop mode on some of the Sony E-mount full-frame sensors to be able to use these types of lenses. If you're buying this lens, however, I would not suggest buying it specifically for a full-frame camera. Just don't do it. I care about you, just don't do it. The cropping of the image to get rid of that vignetting kind of defeats the purpose of shooting with a full-frame sensor. Because this was built for the APS-C sensors, there is a 1.5 times crop factor to this lens, which means that this 50mm lens with their 1.5 times crop factor is the equivalent of using a 75mm lens on a full-frame camera. So it's not a true nifty 50. Its maximum aperture obviously is f1.8, its minimum aperture is f22, but really, who's using this lens at f22? But that's the minimum aperture for those of you who are curious. It has 7 aperture blades, which helps to make the bokeh much creamier. It has a circular aperture, which really helps, and as I said with the lens hood, it's something that you don't really notice when it's there, but when it's not there, you really do notice it. You don't want all kinds of shapes in your background as your bokeh flares. If your background's looking like geometry class, you have done something wrong, and this helps to prevent that. This lens has a 32-degree field of view, which is pretty narrow. I mean, it's equivalent to a 75mm lens, so you're not gonna get too wide with this lens. It has a minimum focus distance of 1.28 feet, or about 0.39 meters. Something that I'd like to mention about this is that yes, it can focus on something as close as 1.28 feet. However, it is slower at focusing at objects that are around that 1.5 to 2 foot range. Once it gets beyond 2 feet, then the focus is fast, then the focus is automatic. And I'm not saying that it can't focus on things that are closer than 2 feet, because it can, but there's going to be a lot more searching, it's going to take a lot more time, and it might be frustrating if you're trying to get that quick focus. So if you want fast automatic focus, it has to be outside of 2 feet in my experience. As I said, this lens does come with optical steady shot, which in my opinion is a necessity if you are shooting with a camera between the a6000 to a6400 range, because these cameras do not come with in-body image stabilization. Especially if you're shooting video, you need that stabilization. If you don't want to just run warp stabilizer or any kind of electronic stabilization in post-production, which can be kind of iffy. Also, as I mentioned, it comes with autofocus, which is very fast and also very quiet. And this is the advantage of using a native Sony lens on a Sony camera. The autofocus is just awesome. This lens comes with a very wide, very easy to use manual focus ring. I'm a big fan of this focus ring. Just super easy to use, great location. The way it works is that it completely disengages the autofocus motor when you switch to manual focus, which means that you can get the manual focus dialed in extremely precisely if you're using this manual focus. The downside to disengaging the autofocus motor is that it is slow, and you literally have to crank this thing if you're trying to react your focus all the way to something far or all the way to something close. And for this reason, the manual focus is almost impossible to use in video just because it's not fast. It's not fast. In photos, you only need to be in focus for the moment that that shutter is snapped. In video, you may have to keep a moving subject in frame, in focus, for extended amounts of time, and for that reason, the manual focus is almost unusable. The Sony website has listed the dimensions as 2.5 by 2.5 inches. This seems like a kind of weird optical illusion. It does seem wider, or it does seem longer than it is wide, and maybe the lens hood is affecting that. Maybe without it you get closer to that. So 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches, or 62 by 62 millimeters. Whatever the dimensions are, this is a small compact lens. Even with the lens hood on, it doesn't really take up much space. I mean, it still can fit in my hand. As far as build quality goes, I'm not going to take this apart and dissect the way that it's built. I don't have the budget for that. However, it feels solid, it feels nice. It's a primed lens, so there's not many moving parts outside of the manual focus ring, so I don't ever worry about tossing it into a bag because it doesn't have as many moving parts as, say, a zoom lens does, and it's very solid. It has a metal mount where it comes in direct contact with the camera. The barrel is also coated with an aluminum alloy to help its durability a bit. However, the lens still is mostly plastic. Now on to the review portion. 2 disclaimers. Disclaimer number 1. This is not a paid advertisement. I paid full price for this lens. Actually, I did not pay full price for this lens because I try not to pay full price for any of my camera gear if I can help it. Camera gear is expensive, but that's not the point. The point is I paid money for this lens. I'm not being paid by Sony to make this review. Second disclaimer. This is not a review where I will be analyzing still photos taken with this lens for sharpness. I will still mention sharpness because sharpness is obviously a crucial part of any lens. However, it's not going to be to the extent of enlarging tiny parts of photos and comparing the sharpness to other enlarged tiny sections of photos of other lenses, because that is just something that's not very interesting to me. However, I realize that this is necessary, and there is lots of other reviews out there that can show you that if that's more of what you want to see. So thank you to those of you who do these videos, because I would hate it. So let's start off with the reason that a lot of you have either purchased this lens or are considering purchasing this lens, and that reason is portraits. A 50mm F1.8 or a nifty 50 is one of the first recommendations you're gonna get when you're trying to upgrade from your camera's kit lens, and this is an absolute beast at shooting portraits. Keep in mind, however, that this is not a true nifty 50. This is the equivalent of a 75mm portrait lens, so this is not great for full body portraits. If that is something that you're looking for, I'd suggest a 35mm portrait lens, which would be the equivalent of a 52.5mm lens on a full frame camera. This lens is incredibly fast at f1.8, and to put this in perspective, the Sony kit lens, which I'm shooting this with right now, at 50mm can only open up to f5.6. At 50mm on this lens, it can open up all the way to f1.8. Huge difference. For this reason, the bokeh on this lens is incredible. As I mentioned before, it has a circular aperture, which helps that bokeh to be even creamier. You're not gonna get any hexagons or pentagons or octagons or whatever gon is seven-sided. You're not gonna get any of those. It's gonna be circular and it's going to look great. In my opinion, the biggest advantage that you get from lugging around a proper camera over a cell phone, over a point and shoot, is the shallow depth of field, that background blur, that bokeh. That's what you get for putting up with the bigger mirrorless or DSLR camera, and this lens helps you to maximize on that bokeh to get the most out of that advantage that you get for lugging that camera around. However, to get that bokeh, to maximize that effect, you have to open up this lens wide, maybe even wide open at f1.8, and opening a lens up all the way can reduce the sharpness in pretty much all lenses. That is the case with this lens, however, it does still stay relatively sharp at f1.8, at least in the center. And if you're shooting portraits, the center is really all you care about, especially if you are shooting at f1.8. One point I'd like to make is that there is chromatic aberration if you're shooting wide open at f1.8. It's not a deal breaker, it's not atrocious by any means, but you can notice it. It's something that can be easily corrected in Adobe Lightroom or any other comparable photo editing software, but it is something to bring up because chromatic aberration does exist at f1.8. You can see it. This lens is only good when it's wide open. It's only good when it's wide open because the advantage that you're getting by buying a nifty 50, or in this case a nifty 75, nifty 575, it's fast, it can open wide, and you can get so many advantages from that. By closing up the aperture, you lose all of those advantages. This Sony kit lens can open up to f5.6 at 50mm, so if you're shooting this lens at f5.6, you're losing the advantage over the kit lens. You might as well just save your money and continue to shoot with the kit lens. You have to open up wider than that to gain any kind of advantage. So what are the advantages to opening up this lens? I'm glad you asked. The fact that this lens is so fast. And the reason it's called fast is because it can let in more light, and the more light that it lets in, the faster shutter speed you can shoot at. One of these advantages to this lens being so fast is that it is great at sunset shoots. Shooting during sunset and or golden hour is one of the most popular times to shoot. It's my personal favorite time to shoot portraits because the lighting is always great. And the fact that this lens can open all the way up to f1.8, it lets so much light in, and it allows you to shoot beyond sunset if that's what you need to do. If sunset has come and it's past and you still haven't really got the shot that you want, you can keep on shooting because of how much light it lets in. You can continue to shoot until you get that shot. You have a little bit of extra time. This lens will allow you to continue to shoot at faster shutter speeds with a lower ISO. This gives you plenty of advantages. You can continue to shoot handheld shots for longer because you can shoot at faster shutter speeds. That small camera shake that you get from shooting handheld will not show up like it will on other slower lenses because you can shoot at faster shutter speed and you won't get as much motion blur. Another advantage to this, you can continue to incorporate motion in your photos. When the sun goes down, you won't have to ask your model to stand like a statue. You can continue to allow him or her to move, to walk, and it will give it a more authentic feel because there's nothing worse than asking your model to stand completely still. That is not fun for anybody. Finally, you will have less noise in your photos because you were able to shoot at a lower ISO. ISO for me is the last resort. If I can't open my aperture any wider, if I can't slow down my shutter speed anymore, but I still need to let more light in, that's when I turn up my ISO, because it does allow a lot of noise into the photo. This will help you keep that ISO level down. It'll keep your noise level down. And when you get to editing, you are going to love it. So if I was on a portrait shoot and I could only bring one lens, and this happened to be that one lens, I would be comfortable in having only this lens on a portrait shoot. It is fast, it's portable, and it's affordable, which is something that I haven't talked about yet. Now, moving on to the video portion of this review. Most reviews talk about the amazing portraits you can take with this lens, how it's a great portrait lens, and that's understandable. However, this is a video channel, and I do want to talk about the video of this lens because the video is still pretty good. You might not be buying this lens for video specifically, but it's a nice little added bonus. As with stills, you're going to want to shoot video with this lens wide open or pretty close to wide open to gain that advantage of that nice bokeh, that nice shallow depth of field that everybody loves. Everybody is all about depth of field right now, shallow depth of field. Specifically relating to video, because you're shooting with this lens so wide open, I would recommend an ND filter for this lens to keep your frame rates down. And if you're on a budget, you can't quite buy an ND filter yet, that is completely fine. And shooting without an ND filter with this lens wide open, the video is still passable. Nobody's gonna thumbs down your vlog because you shot that one 5-second clip at 500 frames per second instead of 60. It's okay. It's okay. Autofocus is everything in video. You have to be able to keep moving subjects in focus a lot of the time in video. It's what you're going to be using most of the time, and the autofocus for this lens is great. Racking focus on this lens is so smooth and it looks so great because of the shallow depth of field. It makes little to no noise. I have never in a video found any kind of noise from the autofocus of this lens. None of it has ever gotten picked up on my microphone. I just don't really have to worry about it. It does its thing and that's it. Conversely, the manual focus is pretty much useless for video. For reasons I already described, the manual focus is just way too slow to be able to use in video. You're going to have to turn this so fast that you're gonna get just way too much camera shake. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Don't do it. I care about you. This is, however, a prime lens and it does not have the versatility of a zoom lens. For those of you who don't know, prime lens means basically that you can't zoom in or out. The focal length is fixed. Okay, so as you can see, there's absolutely no way you can vlog with this lens unless you really love close-ups. It's not even close to being wide enough to be able to vlog with, but it's a great secondary lens to get pretty nice looking B-roll. For this reason, I would not feel comfortable at all if this was my only lens for a video shoot, just because in a video shoot it's a little bit different. You do have to get multiple shots from multiple focal lengths to make a video work. Usually a prime lens is not enough for that, and for that reason this cannot be your only lens if you're shooting video. I would be 100 times more comfortable with the Sony kit lens as my only lens for a video shoot than I would with this 50mm prime as my only lens for a video shoot. So there are some final thoughts and miscellaneous points that haven't come up organically yet, but I still want to get to. The first point being the durability. As I mentioned before, the lens feels solid, it feels well built. However, with this lens, dust seems to always get inside of this lens, and I'm not talking just on the front lens or just on the rear lens. I'm talking actually inside of the lens. Dust seems to get in there all the time, which is, I don't like that. In fact, the other two lenses that I use all the time shooting videos are the Sony 16 to 50mm kit lens, which I'm shooting with right now, and this 55 to 210mm zoom lens. And both of those lenses have moving parts. And because they have moving parts, there's airflow coming in and out of the lens every time it zooms, which increases the probability of dust getting inside of these lenses. However, I've never had dust get inside of this lens or the kit lens. I've had dust on multiple occasions get inside of this prime lens, which makes no sense. And this is not by any means an expensive lens. However, this lens costs more than this zoom lens and the Sony kit lens combined. So the fact that dust gets in here all the time. Luckily, because this is a portrait lens, you will almost always be shooting with the lens open very wide, and for that reason, the dust will almost never get into your image. You'll never be able to see dust spots in the image unless it's something very major. Still really annoying though. The second miscellaneous point is value. I don't mention price in my product reviews, and that's because price fluctuates and different currencies are used in different countries, and you can literally look up the price in 10 seconds instead of watching this whole 15+ minute rant just to hear what the price is of this lens at the very end of it. So I don't mention price, however, I do mention value. Value I define as the relationship between what you pay for a product and what the product is worth. And I think this lens has incredible value. The Sony 50mm F1.8 is an entry-level portrait lens, yes, and for that reason it does have clear weaknesses. At that price point, how can it not have clear weaknesses? However, it does have some great strengths as well, and it can do things that lenses that are much more expensive than this lens can do. You'd be hard-pressed to find a lens at the same price point that's this sharp, this fast, has optical steady shot, and has autofocus. This is great bang for your buck. So the bottom line, the final point, would I recommend this lens? And that is a resounding yes. I would absolutely recommend this lens. It's one of my favorite lenses. This is a great lens, a great first upgrade from your kit lens to be able to take some awesome looking portraits, some great looking B-roll, and it's not versatile enough to be a standalone lens. You will need another lens, most likely your kit lens. However, it's a noticeable improvement from the kit lens, and it packs a punch for anybody out there who's on a budget, which, face it, that is pretty much all of us. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that it was useful to you. I know that in product reviews I cannot possibly get through every single thing about this product, so anything that I missed that you still want me to go over, let me know in the comments below and I will answer you right back. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.